The nice thing about having a video guitar course is that you get to see how things are done by watching my fingers. This is how I learned to play, and most of my friends learned. We showed each other things. But when you're not using this course, you're going to buy music books, and you're going to have to be able to look at the book and know where to put your fingers and how to do things. So on this first part of tape number 2, I'm going to show you how they draw chords. And with that information, you'll be able to go get yourself a good chord dictionary and start practicing your little fingers off. Now, in the last tape, we established that you had 6 strings in your guitar, and the 6th string was your fat string. When drawing chords, they draw your 6 strings, and the string going down on the left, we assume that's your 6th string. Now, this may surprise you, but I did not go to art school to do that. And, people do send me letters and say, can you teach me to draw straight lines? And I say, well, that's not really what I do best. But nonetheless, this is your 6th string. Then you need your 5th string, your 4th string, your 3rd string, your 2nd string, and your 1st string. This is called a chord diagram or a chord window. When they draw them, they do not show strings as being thicker or thinner. They're just telling you that these are your 6 strings, and the string here is your fat string. Now remember your guitar parts. At the top of the guitar, you had the white bone that went across the top before the machine heads, which we called the nut, and that is your first line in a chord diagram. Okay? There she be. So this is not a fret. Then they draw a couple or 3 frets. They square it off. This wouldn't be there. So you now have your 6 strings going down, your first couple frets, and then they draw where you're supposed to put your fingers. Now I'm going to draw the chord that we did last tape, the E chord, because you already know how to play that, and it'll be a little easier for you to follow. Now when they want you to hit a string, strike a string, although it's not fingered, we said last tape that it was called open. Well, on a chord window, 0 means open. The 1st string, the 2nd string, and the 6th string on an E chord was open. Alright? Now, the fretted notes, I'm going to draw in red just to show you. In a regular chord book or in a songbook that had the chords drawn, they would not do it in red, but it's just a little easier. Okay? Now you remember that the 3rd string was played behind the 1st fret. So they draw a circle or a dot. Theirs would look an awful lot nicer than mine. And they would put a number beside it to tell you which finger of the left hand. Now, some books do, some books don't. But we're going to do it just to make it a little easier. Also, on the E chord, you had the 5th string at the 2nd fret and the 4th string at the 2nd fret. And that was with your 2nd finger, and that was with your 3rd finger. Okay? And then they would say E chord. They might go E major, but I doubt it. Chances are they would just have E and the diagram to there. Alright? And then you would strum that chord for as long as they indicated. And this is another tricky thing. When you buy music, the music that you buy will probably be songs that you know. And you can avoid a lot of problems because the chord will be written over the music and the words, and you stay on that chord and you strum it until you get to the next chord. And all you do is you look underneath the chord to see what word you're on. And because you know how the song goes, you practice a bit until you get the chord changed to fit. Now we're going to draw the A minor chord, which is the other chord you learned last tape. We're going to draw it right beside, because I want to show you one other thing. So we'll make our 6 lines. 1, 2, which is our strings. 3, 4, 5, 6. There's the nut. There's your first fret. Actually, I should do this. There's your second fret. There's your third fret. Alright, now the chord is A minor. And the only reason I'm drawing this is that I want you to see that when they don't want you to strike a string, usually they write an X over it. Now the A minor, you remember, looked exactly like the E chord, except the first finger was here on the second string, and these two fingers moved over to the third and fourth string. So it's virtually the same chord as the E chord, but we have an X, which means do not strike the string. Now, when you buy a chord book or a lot of music books, they don't write an X. If they don't want you to strike the string, they simply don't put a 0 over it. And it's about 50-50, so it's important that you know this. I'm going to draw that A minor chord one more time. I'm going to draw it as quickly as possible, because I just want you to see. Some books would indicate it like this. And because there's not a 0 over that sixth string, it's the same as if they had an X. Alright? And sometimes they don't put the fingers in as well. But that's up to you to finger. It's a good idea to get a chord dictionary, or just copy out chords as you go along. And you know, when you watch MTV or country television, whatever style you like, start watching the guitar player's fingers, and you'll be surprised. You know, with just a few chords, you can play an awful lot of music. All right, we're going to go back to our guitar now and look at some new chords and some different ways to play them. All right, let's move on now and have a look at some chords in the key of G. You'll find in your playing that chords are almost always found in certain combinations and almost always together in the key of G. And by key, we mean a certain combination of chords, a certain combination of notes. Key of G uses the chords G, C, D7, or sometimes D, and that would sound like this: G, C, D7. Some examples. Or how about also common are E minor, A minor, and B7. Now we know the A minor from the last tape. We know E minor, which is very similar to an E, and the B7. And those sound like this: E minor. Notice that the minor chord is a very sad chord. A minor. When you mix those three up, G, C, and D7, E minor, A minor, and B7, you get combinations like this: G, E minor, A minor, D7. So let's get down to it and figure out those chords. You'll notice my thumb peeking ever so gingerly around the fretboard. That's not supposed to happen. In the old days, the days of classical guitar technique and all of that, which I shouldn't say the old days, it's still very legitimate technique that the thumb never be seen, because as the thumb comes up over the fretboard, it draws the fingers back, which makes it very hard for them to form chords. But in these steel string guitars, the necks have gotten very, very slim, so it's very difficult to keep your thumb behind. If you have a nylon string guitar, it's much easier to keep that thumb behind. But if you see my thumb pop up, well, let's face it, I'm not the best guitar player in the world, but it's also not quite the sin that it used to be. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now the G chord, we're going to show you two ways to play it. This is a bit of a stretch. We'll start with the first finger and place it on the 5th string behind the 2nd fret. We'll take the 2nd finger, place it on the 6th string behind the 3rd fret. Now again, you want to keep them as close to the frets as possible, but right there I can feel the tension. You know, you may have to keep it back there for the first while. So now, if you play my 6th string, 5th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd, we're almost there, but we want to play the 1st string behind the 3rd fret. Now we can play it with the 3rd finger, or we can play it with the 4th finger. It's best if you know how to play it with both fingers, one or the other. Now there's the G chord. An alternate way to play it is with the 2nd finger playing the 5th string behind the 2nd fret, the 3rd finger playing the 6th string behind the 3rd fret, and the 4th, the little finger, playing the 1st string behind the 3rd fret. Obviously it's going to sound the same because you're playing the same frets. Now the big advantage of playing with the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th finger is that when you go to the C chord, which is the next chord in our pattern, it's very easy to move the fingers. Whereas from this G chord, which is a little easier to play, it's quite a move to the C. But we'll see. Alright, let's go from the G. The C chord will begin as the 1st string open, then the 1st finger plays the 2nd string behind the 1st fret, the 3rd finger plays, the 3rd string is open, the 2nd finger plays the 4th string behind the 2nd fret, the 3rd finger plays the 5th string behind the 3rd fret. The 6th string is not played, so it's what's called a 5-string chord. Now I'll strum starting at the 5th string, starting at the 5th string, one note at a time. With a little bit of a rhythm. Now these chords, the G, C, and D7, are not terribly easy chords, but they are so common, and you will use them so much that we may as well get stuck right into them. Now, here's the G chord using the easier fingering, 1, 2, and 3. Here's the C chord, 1, 2, and 3. The 3rd chord in our pattern is called D7, and to make the D7, you leave the 1st finger right where it is. From the C chord, the 1st finger is on the 2nd string 1st fret. You leave it there, and you make a triangle by placing the 2nd finger on the 3rd string 2nd fret and the 3rd finger on the 5th string 2nd fret, and we only strum 4 strings. Now I'm going to strum the G chord 4 times, I'm going to change to the C chord 4 times, the D7 chord 4 times, and back to the G chord 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now that's quite a feat in itself. Your job, of course, will be to memorize the chord and then practice changing from one chord to the other. Now remember we talked about the more difficult fingering of the G, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, and you'll see now why it's such a good fingering is that to get to the C chord, these two fingers, the 2nd and 3rd finger, only move over one string, and then the 1st finger drops to the 2nd string 1st fret. Now it's easy for me to do. I've played this chord for 20 years, but nonetheless, once you get it, it's much easier to make a movement like that. Than a movement like this. That gives you an awful lot to do. Now, when you practice changing chords, you should try to play slowly and with a steady beat. Now, if I count to 4, each number that I count represents one strum. So I'll count 4 so you hear the beat, and then I'll strum 4 G chords. And you try it with me. So get your fingers on the G chord. I'll give you a second to do that. Alrighty. Now I'm going to count to 4, I won't be playing, and then I'll strum 4 times at the same speed that I was counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we're going to move to the C chord. Give you time now. 2nd string, 1st fret, 4th string, 2nd fret, and the 5th string, 3rd fret. Okay, now if you make a mistake and accidentally strum 6 strings, it's not so terrible that you should stop. Always aim to continue playing, continue strumming, because you don't want to break that rhythm. So I'll count 4 again, and we'll strum the C chord 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now to get to the D7, remember it's much simpler. The 1st finger stays where it is, and then you put the 2nd finger on the 3rd string 2nd fret, and the 3rd finger on the 1st string 2nd fret. You only strum 4 strings. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Now, here comes the fun part. I'm going to count to 4 again, and I'm going to strum 4 Gs, 4 Cs, 4 D7s, and back to 4 Gs. And your job will be to practice until you can strum along without stopping. Now, even if your chords get mushy, like you may start with a nice clean sound and end up with a fairly dead sound because you have to try to remember where to put everything. Here is an example of probably how it's going to sound for you. 1, 2, 3, 4. By the time you get to that last chord, it's pretty terrible. But with practice, you'll get it more smooth. Now remember, of course, when you're singing, obviously, you can't stop. And this is why the most important thing that you'll do for the entire course when it comes to chords is changing on time is the absolute most important thing. You can hit wrong notes, you can hit too many notes, they can be muted, but you can't stop if you're singing or you're accompanying a singer. They can't wait for you to change chords. So really make this your prime imperative. Anyways, here we go for real. I'm going to count to 4, and then you practice till you can play along. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now I'm going to move on now and show you the next 3 chords, E minor, A minor, and B7. The E minor is very much like the E chord that you learned in the first tape, except it's a little bit easier because you don't use the first finger. The E minor is a 6-string chord and is played 6th string open, 5th string behind the 2nd fret with the 2nd finger, the 4th string behind the 2nd fret with the 3rd finger, and then the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st strings open. So count to 4 and strum the E minor chord 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. E minor, by the way, is one of my favorite chords. It's very kind of mellow, and you can do so much. With the G chord, okay, from the E minor, we move to the A minor, which you learnt last tape. So I'm not going to go over it again, only to remind you that it's the 5th string open, 4th and 3rd strings at the 2nd fret, 2nd string at the 1st, and the 1st string open. Okay, 4 strums A minor. 1, 2, 3, 4. The 3rd chord in this series of 3 is called B7. Now we've gotten the major chords, which are a simple letter name, C, G. We've gotten the minor chords, E minor, A minor, and now the B7 and the D7. And what the 7 means is that it's a B chord with the 7th note of a B scale. Okay, major scales, which we haven't learned. You're not expected to know that, but just so if someone asks you what does the 7 mean, it means if you take a B major scale and then take the 7th note, lower it a semitone, you get what's called the dominant 7th. So that's what the 7 means. It doesn't mean 7th fret, it doesn't mean 7 strings or 7 strums. It simply means a B chord with the 7th degree flattened. And the B chord, the B7 chord, is very much like the D7. If you remember, we just learned the D7, but instead of starting with the 1st finger on the 2nd string, you go way over and you put your 1st finger on the 4th string 1st fret. Make the triangle around it, 5th string 2nd, 4th string 2nd, sorry, that's the 3rd string 2nd. And then with your 4th finger, your little finger, you're going to play the 1st string behind the 2nd fret. The 6th string is not played. It's a 5-string chord. 4 strums. Let's do it together. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now you should turn off the tape, practice your E minor, A minor, B7 till it's much smoother. Put the tape back on because I'm going to count to 4 now, and I'm going to strum the E minor 4 times, change to the A minor 4 times, to the B7 4 times, back to the E minor 4 times. Alright, and you play along. You're not finished with this tape until you can play along without slowing down. You can get some muted notes, but try to play in time. 1, 2, 3, 4. A minor, B7, sorry. Okay, now hear those three chords again, a little more quickly. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, as I demonstrated earlier, there's many more things that you can do with those chords once you've got the smooth change. All of those things we will be looking at in this course. In the 20 tapes, you will cover the hammering, the pulling, and the bass runs, all of those things. So be very patient, and remember, these 20 steps have to be learned in order, so when we do get to those more difficult moves, they really won't seem all that difficult to you. So we have G, C, D7, E minor, A minor, B7. And that is your work for this week. You want to practice first to memorize them, so you don't have to think about it. Then you have to start practicing changing from one chord to the other without slowing down. With those chords, by the way, those 6 chords, you could play hundreds of songs. Most songs actually only use 3 chords. Now, you're not quite ready to do it yet, but once you have those chords and a few more, you'll be able to buy your first songbooks and start playing. So it's a lot of information, and I'm telling you that to encourage you, because it may seem very hard at first. Your fingers are stiff and they're getting sore, and you may think, gosh, I'll never get these chord changes on time. Well, the fact is you will, and in a very few weeks. So keep at it, remembering your practice. As your fingers toughen up or get a little less sore, increase the amount of time you're practicing. Okay, you can go up to a half an hour, and if you have a nylon string in particular, that will help a lot. Okay, we're going to catch you on the next tape, where we look at another series of chords and more information. Thank you very much.